All right. Welcome, everyone, to our first session of day 2. We are excited to get started. Here I have Mike Romanowski and Yvette Yee from ZF speaking on engineering review process moving into the 21st century. And a quick reminder, we'll have chat and polling. Please do your comments and questions in the chat and look for the polling icon as well on the right side of your screen. I guess you guys will take questions at the end of the presentation. Does that work for you?
Yep.
Yeah, that should be
Perfect.
fine.
Okay, Mike and Yvette, take it away.
Okay. So I'll go over some quick introductions. We'll give a little bit about us and about ZF. Yvette and I are going to kind of split down the middle, and we're going to cover the background, our product development process, what our objectives were, what we did, and how we feel we moved the engineering review process into the 21st century, what benefits we feel we're realizing, reflections on how we're doing today, and then what's next for us. Okay, next slide, Yvette. So a little bit about us. I've been with ZF, I guess, for greater than 25 years, mostly the former companies. TRW started out at Kelsey Hayes. I've been in active safety system division for basically the whole time. I started in ABS calibration, moved into some engineering project management, and then into systems analysis, and then in my current role of chief engineer, system engineering. So got my BS and MSc from U of M, and then I'm going to switch over to Yvette. She'll do the first part of the presentation, and then I'll take over after polling question 2.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yvette Yee, and like Mike, I've been with ZF and all of its former companies for more than 25 years. I started as a product engineer in R&D for about 6 years before moving on and taking on dedicated roles in continuous improvement as a black belt and a master black belt for the next 15 years. And finally, about 4.5 years ago, I joined Mike's group as a technical specialist. I also have a mechanical engineering degree and an MBA from the University of Michigan. Okay, a little bit about ZF. ZF is a global technology company and supplies systems for passenger cars, commercial vehicles, and industrial technology, enabling next generation mobility. As Mike said, we are in the active safety systems division, where we develop braking and steering systems, including products such as ESC, electronic stability control, IBC, integrated brake control, electric park brakes, electrically powered steering systems, and electrically powered hydraulic steering systems. Overall, ZF does about 32 billion euro in sales, spending about 2.5 billion euro on R&D. We employ over 150,000 employees worldwide. As far as our products, the majority of our products go into passenger cars and light commercial vehicles. About 15% go into commercial vehicles or semi-trucks, and less than 10% go into construction and agricultural machinery, marine craft, aircraft, and wind power. We'd like to initiate our first polling question before we get too deep into our presentation. And that is, are you using project space and team boards in your OROS application? So let's initiate that. Are you guys seeing the polling question?
I see it, Yvette. I think
Okay.
Brittany has to initiate it. There we
Okay.
go. I see some votes coming in.
All right. So it looks like our votes are definitely coming in. So great. It looks like a lot of you are currently using project space and team boards. A few are not using them. And then I guess a couple folks where project space and team boards will be new. Okay. All right. So that's some good feedback there. So hopefully some of you guys will learn something new and at least see how we're using project space and team boards. Okay, like any manufacturing company, we work on different programs. At a high level, we have our program development process, which includes a planning phase where we're looking at the customer opportunity that's presented before us. We have a product and process design process or phase where we're looking at CV, concept verification, and design verification. We have a validation phase before we head into launch and production. Within ZF, we have a program management group, and they have gate reviews. So they, throughout this process, have gates A1 through A8. As Mike had mentioned, we are in the engineering group, so we have our own process as far as gate reviews, but our scope narrows down a bit. So we have our reviews right up to gate A6 right before launch. So we cover project planning and then some activities before we kick off our engineering activities. So at minimum, we might have 5 reviews because within customer engineering, we can tailor out the CV and the DV phases. So we would always have project planning, system requirements, engineering kickoff, and then definitely a PV design review, and then engineering sign off. And these reviews here in the middle, the CV and the DV phases, can be tailored in or out. So at maximum, we would have 9 reviews, and then at minimum, just these initial 3 and the last 2, so 5 reviews. So we're customer engineering. We do have a product engineering group, and they too have their own reviews. So they have CV, DV, PV, and product sign off. Timing wise, what happens is that we start with A1 in program management, which is approval to develop a product. And that really gets the ball rolling for us in engineering. So we move from A1 to customer engineering having their reviews, and then the tables really get turned. And we expect engineering then to sort of take the lead as far as the timing of their reviews. They would, for example, have their CV design review before customer engineering has their CV system design review. And these happen before we get back to program management, where they have their concept verification gate review, or A4. So being in customer engineering, what we really wanted to focus on was improving the process for us, the reviews and the metrics. So in product engineer, or not in product engineer, but in customer engineering, we had 2 metrics. The first one being schedule adherence. So we check and we expect that these gate reviews are held on time. We also check to make sure that they're not past due or that they're not late. So we have a metric for schedule adherence, and then we also have one for review results. Whereas we have the reviews, we check and we track whether the review was green approved or if it was not approved. And by not approved or being a red review, there would be too many open actions or items that were critical to the project. And somewhere in between, we would have a conditional approval as our final review result. So in practice, we have our product development gate reviews being led by engineering project managers, and we have over 130 engineering project managers around the globe. As the managers have their gate reviews, they are filling out checklist items in the form of Excel files. So they'll go into an Excel file, they'll answer a number of questions and assess the questions, and they store them in an Excel file. In the Excel file, there are multiple tabs where each tab is a gate review and has the questions specific to that gate review. So we had 3 checklists to begin with, one for each product line, and we'll just call them A, B, and C. Some of the questions were specific to, for example, just product line A, and you wouldn't see them in product lines B or C. Other questions were common across all three products. So the files were stored on individual laptops, where sometimes the EPMs had no trouble finding the files, and other times, not so much. Or the EPM stored them in SharePoint or on some shared drives. So, I had mentioned that we have two metrics. And those metrics are reported monthly. So as the EPNs are storing their files, it became quite a large and difficult task to gather all of those files and all the contents into a monthly report. So as far as objectives, we had the obvious objective to commonize and standardize the engineering review process and the reporting metrics globally. We also had what we'll call transformative objectives. And the first one was we aimed to find an enabling technology to help improve the culture, collaboration, competency, and leadership of our employees and of our EPMs. We wanted more active engagement and involvement from our team members. And we also not only want to improve the outcome of our audits, but we wanted to make it easier going into the audit. And we want to actually have the act of being audited, be somewhat easier for our EPMs. So what we did and how we did it, and that is move our engineering review process into the 21st century, is back in 2017, Mike and I attended our first Knowledge Aware conference. And this was our first brush with OROS and seeing the potential that it had. So we had up to then just started looking at ways to improve the customer engineering reviews, the process, and the metrics. And so we spent much of 2018 evaluating different solutions, including developing a concept using OROS out of the box. By the fall of 2018, we had what we felt was a viable concept and solution to share with our management team. So we did. We shared our concept with management, and in early 2019, we were approved for a seed project. So we started really working with the OROS engineers, and about the middle of the year, we held our first user feedback session with EPMs and approvers of our gate reviews. So we collected some very valuable feedback in that pilot feedback session, and we continued to work on developing the finer details of our process and the approvals. By about this time last year, we were able to locally pilot our OROS concept. And then a couple months later, we piloted in Europe and in Asia Pacific. Finally, at the beginning of this year in January, we rolled out our process globally. And a couple months ago, we gathered some mid-year feedback, some of which we'll share with you guys. So if you were to ask us what were the keys to our success, we would definitely start off with our experience back in 2017 by attending the Knowledge Aware conference and just becoming aware of OROS and what it could do possibly with us. And then developing that concept out of the box was also key to get our management to approve us for a seed project and move forward. Mechanically, what we did inside OROS is that we digitalized the questions and the checklist. So each one of our KPACs, or each one of our questions went into a KPAC, and then we developed KPAC sets for our product lines and then for each of our reviews. We also digitalized the engineering review process. We used method KPACs, and we included checkpoint flags in our process. And we also initiated 2 KPIs in OROS. We digitalize the approval process as well. So we're using the OROS approval reports and the mechanisms for gaining approvals. And then we package everything in the process and the checklist into team boards, and we are making use of project space. So there were a few in our first polling question that are new to team boards and project space. We'll just give our quick nod to Chris Pizzo and our friends over at GM. A couple of years ago, Chris presented a GM team boards integration presentation at the conference, and I think that's still available if you want to take a look at that for some finer details about team boards and project space. So at this point, we'd like to initiate our second polling question, and that is, are you using the OROS automated approval process out of the box? For example, are you using the auto move of assessment controls to assessment complete? So I think that question should be popping up on your screen there on the side.
Yep, looks like it's coming through now.
Okay. So I really like these polling questions and that they're live.
Well, that's an interesting mix, Yvette.
It is.
Okay. So it looks like it's starting to settle down a little bit, but it looks like it's almost an even third each. So that's interesting. So go ahead and move on to our next. So about a third each. Okay, so I'm going to start to cover what we did in some of the more details. Yvette kind of showed the mechanisms and what our benefits were. So as we were saying, we had a lot of Excel sheets. We had 3 Excel sheets with several questions, some unique, some similar. And I think what we found is in the end, it was a maintenance nightmare, in my opinion, because I was doing most of the maintenance. So we had around 789 questions across the 3 Excel files, and we were able to compact that down to 122 unique K-packs. And by using dynamic sets, we're able to combine those in our different product lines. So we can use the same question, the same wording, in each one of those product lines, which is nice. It also allows us to, take a look across at those answers as well. So this, to me, was a huge improvement. We went from revision controlling a complete set of checklists and questions in the Excel files to having a individual versioning of each one of the K-packs, which are each one of our questions. So that was a huge improvement. So that hit that second bullet point there, the individual question versus full file version control. We originally had 3 product lines. We were able to increase that with the use of the dynamic sets to 6 so that we could further refine which questions the EPM had to answer. And that was another improvement. So they weren't answering not applicable to a lot of questions because they were kind of a combination of 2 product lines. And now we can take a look and see how each individual question is getting answered, which is really nice just to see, because we release this globally, so we can see if that question is answered different by region, by project type, by product line. So definitely a lot of benefits. So in the approval process and just the overall engineering process, We were doing that in each of the regions, somewhat similar, but we had no common tool, no way to see what the other regions were doing. So we were able to standardize and go with one global process for braking engineering. So that was definitely a good benefit. The approval process, it varied per region. We typically had the meeting, so we had an overall review meeting, and at the end of that, we took everyone's approvals. Other regions were very strict about having, hard signatures on paper. So they would get those on paper, they would digitize those into PDFs and then attach them to the Excel files. And it was very difficult, to chase people around to try and get those approvals. And now when we have global projects, we can include approvers from various regions. So this also gave us some additional flexibility in having global projects, which certain items are done in individual regions. So we can include those approvers, which is very nice. So, and looking at the team boards in the project space, from a management perspective, this is very nice because we have ability to look across all the projects. Not everybody has full access. So for instance, if you're an EPM or a manager on GM, you can see all the GM projects. If you go up a level to our upper management, they can look across all projects. And then, it's nice to have that common storage location. So anyone that has access can go into that team board. They can pull up the checklist. They can look at the questions. They can see who approved it. So it's very nice. With the question updates, it's very easy in the assessment to see when we need to update our questions. So we know we always have the current version. With Excel, people always wanted to use the one that they used on the last project. So when that occurred, they were usually potentially 2 or 3 versions out of date. So they may not always have the current version of the questions. And especially if we deleted questions or added new ones. So with this, we feel we have definitely increased the transparency and then the real-time performance. So management can take a look in there anytime they need or feel they want to check on a project. It's a shared solution for our global projects, as I kind of mentioned above, and we have a lot more flexibility for larger projects that are grouped together that have staggered launch windows. So sometimes we see a project and it'll come in, first launch, say it's in July of 2021, they may stagger 3 or 4 different additional over the next year. So gives us some flexibility there to add some additional reviews for each one of those individual projects at the launch. And I guess the last comment we're going to make here, this was really good timing. We went for our full global release on January 1st of this year. So we found that was probably perfect timing with, after we were 3 months in, the pandemic comes, we have the mandatory work from home. So we found this very, very beneficial, especially in the area of approvals. So we could hold those reviews via Teams, we could go over the assessments, and then everyone could give their approval. So definitely some benefits there. Okay. So how are we doing? So after 6 months, we came up with a questionnaire that we put out in Microsoft Forms. And I know it's real hard to read all the questions here, not intending to cover each one of the questions, but we kind of wanted to make some broad-based conclusions from what we saw. So we have a lot more global projects that, than we used to, and those teams are working together. So we might have design in one region and development and production in another region. So they can all work in the same team board. They can see the checklists, and then we can make sure that everyone has good access to that. We also, I know our timeline might look a little bit longer to some people, but what we found is even though you write down a question, if you start to look at the interpretation of each question, we found that it was misinterpreted depending on if you were an AP or an EU. So it took us several months to actually work with a small global team to bring all those questions into a common understanding. And since they were KPACs, if certain regions had difficulties, we could put a lot of additional information in the KPAC to help them understand. We also put in what are evidences of passing this particular question. So that also helped with audits. It definitely helped us fit in with remote and work from home models. And I think now that we have a lot of people using it, we see more people embracing and promoting OROS outside of Yvette and I. So, and then with this question, this set of questions here, it was around how they navigate through OROS, how they're able to do certain things. Just looking broad-based, if you're on the left side, it's, they may be having difficulties. If it's on the right side, they are easily navigating, or they may not have tried it yet. So I guess one of the other points here is we had an additional question in our survey where we can stratify the data based on the role. So we can then find out some of these are from an EPM standpoint, so engineering project manager. So they're doing the assessments and marking the questions and setting the overall approval status or overall review status. Other people that are coming in as approvers may not navigate through as much as the EPM. So that's one of the things that we're also able to identify here. And one of our future items that could be to help to identify what additional training we might need. So the one last thing I want to put on the slide, and I won't go over these questions, we had found that similar if you're on the right side of the 0 to 100, it's easier in OROS than in Excel. So I think you'll find that amongst all the questions we asked, the majority of them, aside from copying and pasting, that's interesting, they found it to be easier to handle inside of OROS.
And Mike, just a heads up, we have a minute and a half, and I do want to get to one question to make sure it hasn't already been addressed. Gotcha. So I think we're going to skip that last poll.
Okay, no problem. So I guess in final comments here, we have a lot of active engagement from the stakeholders now. Since we're using issues management, that is one of the things that is asking people for additional licenses because they want to assign all those out and have all the team members. So right now we have licenses in product engineering for braking and in our EPM and our customer engineering area. So that's one thing that's coming up, more licenses. And then we've definitely improved our audit compliance. We have, since we're using, if it's the issues management for each one of the questions, if they're rated red or yellow, we can now trace those all the way back to conclusion. And when the auditor comes in and says, how do you know you closed out all of your DV sign-off action items, we can simply pull up issues management, filter on that, and show that they're all closed. So that was a huge, huge improvement for auditing.
Great. Now, Mike, could I just interject and make sure that we get Bruce's? We're going to skip that poll. Yeah. Yep. Bruce, let me make sure. Bruce is asking, what KPIs internally to ZF has OROS improved?
And maybe this last slide here would answer that.
Perfect.
So we are using Power BI, and our polling question is about who's using metrics out of what tool, and we're using Power BI. We have our schedule adherence metric, and we can now see this in the lower right. We have a target of 80% on time, And that is our main metric. We also look at the upper right-hand side here for the review results by approval type. So you can see how many are red, how many were yellow, how many were green. Now, we don't have a metric per se, like you must be 80% green, because we want to use the metric for on time to drive the reviews, and we don't want people to wait to hold reviews because they're red. So this one we just evaluate to see how we're doing overall. The main metric is the 80%. We can then, with Power BI, stratify that in per region in some of our boxes here. And then you can see by the graphs on the left half how many we have here for review result, and then the blue in the lower show us how many are coming over the next months. So those we can see planned, how many were on time. We've got a couple reds in here, and then we could easily in Power BI click on those and tell us which ones are the ones that are the problem. So we can track those down.
You guys have so much information. I hate to interject, but we are running over, and I want to give everyone enough time to jump to the next session. Any last quick words?
From our side, we're just looking to make some improvements, mainly in the area of the approval process. It doesn't exactly work, and I noticed, for about 33% of the people, they're also maybe needing some work to help configure the approval process for that to work for them. We would also like to see a little bit in the Gantt charts. And any other items from your side, Yvette?
No, I don't, nothing else on my side. I will just do the same thing. I know Wendy Lang from GM was very helpful when we attended our first conference. So I think Mike and I were extending the same thing. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to meet with you and talk to you guys outside of this.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Yeah, reach out directly. I put the survey link for this session, so please take a second. I think there's like 2 questions, so it doesn't take long. And then next, we're heading to our next general session at 9:45 with Darwin Peterson on knowledge representation for automated process planning. See you there. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.